Hello, I'm Robert S. Wells, the founder and director of Domestic Abuse Business Support Limited, better known as DABS, the home of the Bridging the Gap project. I'm a published author, a business mentor, passionate public speaker, military police veteran, and a survivor of female perpetrated domestic abuse. Today is the 19th of November. It's International Men's Day, and I'm delighted to have been asked to produce this video by a brand new video-based discussion platform called My POV. My POV, or Point of View, seek to encourage passionate, sometimes controversial, but always authentic discussions on a range of topics which resonate in society today. I personally have posted a number of videos on their platform, and they've been incredibly helpful and supportive. If you're not on My POV, you should be. Now, the month of November in general is recognised as International Men's Month. Along with International Men's Day, we also have Movember, which is one of the standout events that focuses on raising money for men's health charities by getting sponsored to grow some kind of facial hair, like so. International Men's Day is a global day of observance held every year in more than 60 countries around the globe. It invites every man, woman, girl and boy in the world to come together to celebrate men and boys in all their diversity. The three core themes for International Men's Day in the UK are making a positive difference to the well-being and lives of men and boys, raising awareness and or funds for charities supporting men and boys' well-being, and promoting a positive conversation about men, manhood and masculinity. Now, I work in the field of domestic abuse, which is dominated by radical feminists, and I can hear them screaming right now, why do we need an International Men's Day? Aren't men already blessed with the fabulous trappings of a patriarchal society? Down with the patriarchy, I hear them scream. Well, the truth is that millions of men and boys are suffering in silence. Men and boys are being globally erased from the equality discussion, despite the fact that men and boys are the majority victims of war, suicide, crime, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, poor health, child separation and homelessness. And of course, thousands of men and boys are also victims to things like starvation, rape, human trafficking, revenge porn and of course domestic abuse. Let's look at some examples. Education, where it all begins. Boys are falling further and further behind girls at almost every single stage. Girls overshadow boys in GCSEs, A-levels and apprenticeships. Numbers of girls attending university are 35% higher than boys, and male students are 3 times more likely than female students to be excluded from school. Also, male students are 4 times more likely than female students to commit suicide. Unbelievably, even with those statistics, the Department for Education does not fund any initiatives at all that focus on addressing boys' underachievement. So let's look at parenting and a lack of positive male role models. 92% of lone parent households are headed by mothers, and about 1 million kids in the UK are growing up without any contact at all with their fathers. Of course, the majority of these mothers are doing incredible jobs raising their sons and daughters, but many studies have shown that boys need a positive male role model in their lives. Did you know that in 96% of cases, the parents who apply to court for access to the children are men? And at school, where all of those children from these single parent families spend most of the time, the schools are dominated by female teachers, with male teachers making up only 2% in the early years of education. So with no positive male role models at home or in school, are we surprised that boys and men are in crisis? At work, fewer men than women are becoming teachers, GPs, dentists, vets, lawyers, to name but a few. As an example, female GP trainees outnumber their male counterparts by more than 2 to 1 across the UK. What about homelessness? Well, you may not realise this, but 86% of rough sleepers in England are men, and 84% of the hidden homeless are also men. In England, 90% of those who die while homeless are men. And what about prison populations? Well, there are around 85,000 prisoners in England and Wales. And yeah, you guessed it, 95% of those are men. Men are more likely to be sent to prison and receive longer sentences than women for the same crimes. And victims of violence, well, men are nearly twice as likely as women to be a victim of violent crime. And among children, boys are more likely than girls to be victims of violence. Over 2/3 of murder victims are men. Men also make up 73% of robbery victims. And in war, 98.6% of UK military deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan were men. What about illness and poor health? Well, let's take cancer as an example. Figures released in 2018 show that more men now die from prostate cancer every single year in the UK compared to women dying from breast cancer. It means that the male-only disease is now the third most common cancer to die from, after lung and bowel cancer, where again, men remain the majority victims. And even in death, on average, men die 3 to 4 years before women. Now, something that's very close to my heart, domestic abuse and sexual violence. In 2018 and 2019, 786,000 men were recorded victims of domestic abuse. That's 1 in 3 domestic abuse victims. Only 51% of men tell anyone that they're a victim of domestic abuse, compared to 81% of women. And every year, 450,000 men in the UK become victims of stalking. And did you know, and I was surprised by this, that 1 in 5 victims of forced marriage are actually men? Unbelievably, despite all this evidence, men and the charities representing male victims of domestic abuse were refused a voice of any kind at the evidence hearings for the once-in-a-lifetime domestic abuse bill. Whilst there is an ending violence against women and girls strategy, there is, of course, no equivalent strategy for the seemingly disposable men and boys. Other figures include 12,000 men being raped in England and Wales every year, and 1/4 of victims of revenge porn are men. But what about the one area that has been dominated by male deaths for years? And that is, of course, suicide. Well, every suicide is a tragedy, and the World Health Organization and the Global Burden of Disease Study estimates that 800,000 men and women die from suicide every year. That's 1 person every 40 seconds. However, globally, suicide rates in men are over twice as high as they are for women. In the UK, male suicides have consistently accounted for 3/4 of all suicides since the mid-1990s. This means that on average, more than 13 men a day take their own lives in the UK. And are we really surprised by these figures when on top of everything else, we have men and boys being bombarded by negative societal messages driven by the woke cult of social justice that label men at fault via their toxic masculinity? We now have the weaponising of words such as man-slamming, mansplaining, manspreading, manterrupting and bro-propriating. This is a shorthand method of highlighting men's apparent socially problematic behaviour. This is victim blaming in the most extreme and grotesque way, whilst ignoring the suffering which is literally driving men and boys into an early grave. Men and boys today are left feeling criminalised, worthless, belittled, powerless and, in many cases, completely irrelevant. The world is full of kind, loving, brave, hard-working men. Fathers, brothers, sons, uncles and grandfathers that have proven themselves to be great in many ways over the centuries. Men have laid down their lives in the millions to protect your freedoms and to give you a future. So please take today to think of all the great things you have in your life because of the men that are in it, and let them know that they are loved and appreciated. But finally, I want to thank all the fabulous ladies out there that are working hard to support men and male victims, particularly in the sector of domestic abuse. You're all amazing. Thank you so much. So, on International Men's Day, I would ask that we all come together, regardless of our gender, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, ability, or social and workplace position, to support each other and to protect all victims and those less fortunate than ourselves. Happy International Men's Day, everyone. Take care.